Welcome back to another episode. So this week's talk, we're going to be having a chat about corrosion. I'm here in Western Australia. I can't get back to my boat. I'm over here for work. I survey some components on Navy vessels. So I'm over here doing a job for them, and I'm just going to have a quick, brief discussion on corrosion. So corrosion is a huge topic. We can go in depth by miles into this topic, but yeah, I've had a chat with a few people and they said that they want to have a chat about things like corrosion on a diesel engine and how to isolate the electrolysis on a diesel engine. We're going to go into that, but not in this episode. We're going to have to dive deeper and have specific videos on certain avenues of this corrosion chat. So we'll go, like, as far as people want to go into corrosion, we'll go into the scientific part of it if we want, but this episode we're going to stick to the generalization and get a broad knowledge for everyone, because if I dive deep into the craziness of corrosion, a lot of people are just not going to understand how in-depth it does get. So let's just keep it brief and let's talk about the main parts of the corrosion cell. So the first part in the corrosion cell is the anode. The anode is where the actual metal loss takes place. Now we're not going to go in depth into it at the moment, but it's all about how many hydroxyl ions that the corrosion can actually accept in, and we'll get to the nitty gritties later on in another episode. However, basically the anode is what's going to sacrifice itself to protect the cathode, and that's just generally the gist of how the anode is going to go about its job. So basically a corrosion cell is divided into four parts. You've got your anode, your cathode, your electrode, and your electronic bridge between the two. So basically that creates a corrosion cell. It's similar if you want to think about a fire. To create fire you need heat, oxygen, and you need a fuel. A corrosion cell is similar. You need those four aspects to create a corrosion cell. Alright, the next element in the corrosion cell is the cathode. Now the cathode is a lot less complex than the anode. There's a lot more going on in that area, so that'll come later. But the cathode is very much vitally important in the rate of corrosion. So for instance, if you have a very large cathode, say your whole boat, you blasted, but you didn't bother painting it. Obviously you're not going to do that, but you didn't bother painting it. You've got an extremely large cathode. Now, your cathodes, what it does is it releases electrons through those electrolytes. Those electrons get absorbed by the anode, and that basically creates your corrosion cell, and that's your rate of corrosion. Now, if you can reduce that size of that cathode by painting your boat, covering it in some sort of protective coating, then the electrolyte is not pulling those electrons out. It's not allowing that transfer to happen. So then you're basically down to, you might have a scratch, you might have a pinhole, you may have a crevice where you didn't actually get your paint in. Those small areas are now your cathode, and that's all that's transferring those electrons to those anodes. So your rate of corrosion is drastically reduced, and those anodes are going to last a lot longer. So basically that's the job of the cathode. It basically releases the electrons, which gets absorbed into the anode, and the anode transfers that into hydrogen ions and all that sort of stuff. We'll hold up on that sort of in-depth plunge at the moment, but just understanding the fundamentals of a corrosion cell at the start here. That brings us to the third element of the corrosion cell. So the third element is the electrolyte. Now the electrolyte is basically a solution that is on, surrounds, or embodies the actual object that is seen to be corroded. Now that doesn't actually have to be necessarily water. So a lot of people think electrolyte, well, we drink electrolytes, they're great for us, they're bad for corrosion. Yeah, that's true, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a liquid. It could be solid. It could be that it's in the dirt. It could be that you've dug a hole, you stuck your fence post in the ground and you covered it up. That fence post is technically connected to electrolyte, because if it rains, that dirt gets wet, and that's your electrolyte. All the moisture in the soil, it could be the moisture in the roots that are surrounded by the grass. It could be that it's in concrete. Now some concretes do absorb to absorb moisture. But that's another topic. Concrete in corrosion is a separate topic on its own. Concrete actually passivates, and passivating is another form of corrosion, which we'll touch on another day. But the electrolyte could be anything. It could be air. You could be in the tropics and you have a 50% humidity day. That's an electrolyte day. So don't just think, oh, if I just keep it dry, you know, and I don't put it in the water, it's not going to corrode. It will. It rains. There's certain areas of the coastal lines which just have a lot of seawater in the actual air. So that will corrode just as fast as leaving it in the actual water, if not actually more. So the electrolyte is also governed by the amount of ions in the water. So you can get deionized water. You can buy that. It comes out of a factory, and a lot of people put that in their heat exchangers into a lot of stuff, and that's great because that's pure water. It's not going to actually corrode unless it absorbs those ions from your engine or similar. So yeah, you can get, like, fresh water has a lot less ions than salt water. Salt water is actually 100% ionized. So the rate of corrosion is also governed in the electrolyte by the amount of ions in your water. But we'll get into that a little bit. We're just going to calm down and just keep on the brief descriptions of each one at this stage. We don't have a lot of time. So let's move on to the next one. So you guessed it, the last one is electrical connection. So basically it's the easiest one to understand. If you welded two pieces of metal together, they've got an electrical bridge, they're together. If you've got wire and you've connected, you know, if you've got your safety line, and your safety line is a stainless steel safety line, and it's going, and you've screwed it into the hull of your boat, and that's touching some sort of metal. Maybe you've got a steel boat and it's touching the hull, and that goes up into your stainless steel handrails, your stanchion posts, and you know, it might come and brush up against a few other different items. You've got an electrical bridge between multiple different metals. You've got to try and figure out which one's going to corrode first. So that's basically the gist of it. It's not too hard to understand. If you've connected a bunch of different steel together, you've got an electrical gap. You now have an anode and a cathode. But wait, there's more. Oxygen could be considered a fifth element of the corrosion cell. Without it, corrosion could slow down or even completely stop. So when you consider how it all happens, oxygen is required to change hydrogen ions, and they basically remove material, and that's how the corrosion process takes place. And that makes way for the cathode to release more electrons. So without oxygen, we can't have the hydrogen ion conversion happen. So it is a requirement. Unfortunately, the textbooks don't say that there's 5 elements. That's just my opinion. So it's technically only 4 elements, but without oxygen, it just can't happen. So there are 5 elements in my opinion. So that's just a generalized discussion about corrosion. I can't really offer much more than that in the first one, because people need to be able to get their head around all those 4 to 5 elements to be able to move on to all the in-depth stuff. I can't, people have said that they want to talk about the engine electrolysis problems that a lot of boats have and how to reduce that. I think we'll get to that, but I need to build up everyone's base knowledge before I dive straight into all those corrosion issues. So I think we'll have a couple of episodes on the basics, so that when I do talk about all the high-end corrosion problems that people can have, people can understand me. I don't want to be saying a lot of technical jarbo and people just don't get it. So I want my information to come over as useful as possible. I don't want to just sound all techie and, you know, well, people just don't get it. Everyone can understand this. Corrosion is not difficult, but there's a lot of information. There's so much to it. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed this video. I really do want to get a lot of good information out there to support the boating community. We all got to help each other And generally that's what I love about the boating community. Everyone does just that. So everyone is helping me. I'm new to sort of sailboats. I do know a fair bit, but I've done motorboats. I mainly work on larger commercial, like big Navy vessels. But I just, so everyone's helping me, and I need to give back to that community. So here's my take on giving back. I'm going to go through, and we'll do a lot more coating related technical talks. However, this is the first in a corrosion series, and it's going to be a very useful series for people to start watching. So let's just run through those basics. Next corrosion video is going to be a little bit more in depth, so hold on to your horses. This is a big dive into it, so we'll start here and we'll move on. So hopefully everyone has enjoyed the episode. Leave a like, subscribe and comment if you really want, and we'll get back to everyone next week. Thanks guys.